She tried to suffocate my wife once inside the greenhouse that kept her alive. I can still see her face pressed against the glass, that smug smile twisting as if she owned the air we breathed. I told her then if she ever stepped foot on my property again, she'd regret it. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment the war with my HOA began, the moment I realized how far a woman drunk on power would go to destroy a family that refused to bow. My name's Daniel Pierce. I've spent 25 years as a county building inspector. I know every regulation, every code, every loophole these HOA tyrants like to twist for control. My wife Ellen and I moved to Westover Lakes because it looked peaceful, tree-lined streets, quiet neighbors, the kind of place you'd think was safe. After Ellen's accident, that greenhouse in our backyard became her world. The doctors called her recovery impossible, but every morning I watched her limp across the grass, brace on her hip, and smile for the first time in months as she touched those leaves. That little glass house wasn't decoration, it was her therapy, her hope. Then came Claudia Hensley, the HOA president. Perfect hair, perfect manicure, perfect little clipboard she carried like a sword. She showed up one morning, heels clicking across my porch like gunfire, waving a violation notice in my face. "That greenhouse of yours," she sneered, "isn't compliant. It's coming down this week, Daniel. Your wife doesn't get special treatment." I could feel my jaw tighten, my pulse hammering. Ellen was inside, barely strong enough to stand, and this woman was threatening to tear down the one thing that made her feel alive. I stared at her and said, "Funny thing, Claudia, those codes you're quoting, they don't exist. I should know. I helped write the state inspection protocols you're pretending to enforce." Her smile cracked for just a second. That's when I knew I'd hit something she didn't want seen. That day her black SUV tore down the street like a retreating general, but I knew she'd be back. By evening, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. People were getting notices for non-compliant fences, unauthorized lawn decor, improper window coverings. The pattern was clear. Claudia was tightening her grip, using my wife's greenhouse as her example. When I went to the community clubhouse, I saw Ellen's name pinned on the board, circled in red ink. A scarlet letter, her shame trophy. Neighbors whispered, looked away when I walked by. Fear had them by the throat. At the meeting, Claudia sat at the long table like a queen in court. When she read Ellen's violation aloud, she didn't even look at me. Effective immediately, she said, fines will double. If payment isn't received within 10 days, lien action will proceed. Her voice dripped arrogance. I stood chair scraping the floor. The greenhouse is legal, I said. Every inch of it meets county code. Claudia's smile didn't falter. Mr. Pierce, this isn't the place for debate. But then a woman near the front spoke up. If Daniel's greenhouse is illegal, why is yours still standing? Claudia, it's bigger than his. The room fell silent. Claudia slammed her gavel, voice sharp. Irrelevant. But I saw it, the flicker of panic. Her mask slipped, if only for a moment. After the meeting, I stepped outside and found the HOA treasurer, Terrell Gaines, standing by the brick wall, cigarette trembling between his fingers. He didn't speak, but guilt was written all over his face. I said quietly, "You know she can't keep this up forever." He froze, crushed the cigarette, and walked away without a word. But I knew then there were cracks in Claudia's empire. The next morning, the knock came early. 2 men stood on my porch in matching polo shirts labeled HOA Compliance. Behind them idled a truck stacked with hammers, saws, and heavy tarps. Immediate inspection, one said. Board directive. I looked at the tools, then at them. You've got no jurisdiction. State law requires certified officials for inspections. You're not qualified. The taller one smirked. Failure to comply results in automatic removal. We can clear that greenhouse today. I just closed the door. Their curses echoed as they left, but I knew what this was: intimidation. By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing. Claudia was spreading rumors again, telling people Ellen attacked an inspector. That's how power works, not with truth, but with fear. That night, as Ellen sat inside the greenhouse under the soft glow of the grow lights, I felt the weight of it. I started to doubt myself. Maybe this fight wasn't worth it. Maybe we should just take it down, avoid the stress. Watching her sit there, hands trembling but still tending her plants, I hated myself for even thinking it. She looked up through the glass and smiled, faintly fragile but proud. That was the moment I knew I couldn't quit. Not now, not ever. I went to the county building the next morning, badge still in my wallet. The air smelled like old paper and ink, honest work. I flipped through the official state register myself. Every code Claudia cited, non-existent. Pure fiction. I had proof now. On my way out, I stopped by the courthouse. I wanted to see our neighborhood's official HOA filings. The clerk brought me a thick binder stamped Westover Lakes Community Association. Buried deep in those pages, I found the clause Claudia claimed prohibited greenhouses and the line she'd erased in her version: structures for personal or therapeutic use under 250 square feet are exempt. My wife's greenhouse fit perfectly. Claudia had rewritten the rules to attack us. That wasn't just unethical, it was fraud. When I walked out of that courthouse, Terrell was there again. Same haunted eyes, same loosened tie. He looked at the binder in my hands and couldn't even speak, just turned away. He knew exactly what I'd found. That night, Ellen saw the binder on the kitchen table and whispered, "So we're safe now." I told her the truth. Not yet. But for the first time, we're ahead. I stayed up late marking every fake citation, every altered phrase. Each highlight was another nail in Claudia's coffin. A few days later, a courier dropped off a red-stamped envelope. Final notice. Demolition scheduled. Fines doubled. Lien in 10 days. The execution order. Neighbors peeked through curtains as I read it on my porch, waiting to see if I'd finally break. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the park that afternoon with the courthouse binder in hand. I showed a couple neighbors the missing clause. They stared at the page, then at me. "She's been lying to us," one whispered. "To all of you," I said. Word spread fast. By sunset, half the block knew. Fear was starting to turn into anger. That night, Claudia drove past our house in her black SUV, window down, eyes locked on me like a predator circling prey. She didn't stop, just revved the engine and disappeared into the dark. Ellen gripped my arm. "She's not going to stop," she said quietly. "No," I told her. "But neither am I." The next morning, Terrell knocked on my door. His face was pale eyes, bloodshot. He stepped inside and dropped a stack of papers on my table. "They're fake," he whispered. "Every violation notice, every template." She made me draft them. My stomach turned as I flipped through the pages. Different fonts, broken citations, legal phrases copied from other HOAs. "Why tell me now?" I asked. He looked up, voice cracking. "Because you're the first one who didn't fold. Everyone else just paid. I can't live with it anymore." I stared at him. "You know this means she's finished." He nodded slowly. "I know. I kept digital copies. Every version she made me change. You can have them." That was it. The missing piece. The treasurer himself was ready to confess. That night I laid out everything at the local library: manuals, forged notices, the real covenants, Terrell's confession. I made copies, labeled them, organized them into packets. Each one was a mirror reflecting Claudia's lies. When I stepped outside for air, I saw her SUV again parked across the street, engine idling. She just stared. I stared back. She couldn't scare me anymore. A week later, Claudia called for an emergency compliance meeting. Attendance required. She planned to make an example out of us, publicly announce the demolition of Ellen's greenhouse. Instead, it became her funeral. The recreation hall was packed that night. Neighbors lined the walls, whispering. Claudia sat up front behind her gavel, wearing that crimson blazer she always wore when she wanted to look untouchable. "The board has resolved," she began, "to proceed with removal of the non-compliant structure at 14 Westover Drive." Gasps spread through the room. I stood before she could finish. "Before you tear down a therapy greenhouse, you might want to check your facts." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first packet. "Here's the county manual. Every code you cited, fake. I held it high, fluorescent lights glinting off the yellow highlights. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Claudia banged her gavel. "Mr. Pierce, you're out of order." But then Terrell stood. His voice shook, but he didn't back down. "She made me forge them. Every violation notice. My signature's on them." Silence. Pure, stunned silence. Then the crowd erupted, shouts, questions, accusations flying across the room. Claudia's face turned red, her voice cracking as she screamed for order. But it was gone. Her control was gone. I handed out copies to neighbors. "Compare them yourselves," I said. "See what she's been hiding." They flipped pages, whispered, pointed at mismatched fonts and missing sections. Fear turned to fury. For years she'd used their silence as armor. Now their voices were her undoing. By morning, the story hit the local news. I walked into the station myself, handed the anchor everything manual binder fake forms Terrell's confession. "You realize this could expose millions in fraud," the reporter said. "Good," I told her. "It's about time." That afternoon, cameras rolled outside Westover Lakes. Ellen stood beside me, her hand on my arm. "She used lies to steal from us," I said into the mic. "She tried to destroy my wife's lifeline in the process. That ends now." By sunset, the HOA inbox was overflowing. Neighbors who'd paid bogus fines demanded refunds. Social media lit up with posts calling Claudia a criminal. The tide was turning. 2 days later, the HOA called for a special community assembly at the high school gymnasium. They wanted to restore order. What they got was a reckoning. Reporters filled the aisles. County inspectors sat up front. Hundreds of residents packed the seats. Claudia strutted to the microphone, gavel in hand, trying to look composed. "This board remains in full authority," she declared. "These accusations are lies meant to destabilize our community." Her voice trembled, but she pushed through. "We will not be intimidated." I walked down the aisle with my briefcase. "Authority means nothing when it's built on fraud," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I held up the binder. Every violation against my wife was fake. Every fine, every threat, every so-called inspection, all of it, fabricated. Claudia slammed her gavel. "Sit down, Daniel," she barked. But then Terrell stood again, trembling but resolute. "She's lying," he said into the microphone. "She ordered the forgeries. I drafted them. I signed them. I have the proof." The gym exploded. Shouts echoed off the walls. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. Claudia shouted over them, "This is a witch hunt." But no one listened. Her loyalists stared at the floor. The room had turned against her. Then came a voice from behind me, deep, steady, and filled with fire. My son Marcus had just returned from the Marines. He stepped forward, his presence commanding instant silence. "You tried to suffocate my mother in her own greenhouse," he said, every word like a blade. "You thought fear would keep us quiet. You picked the wrong family." The room went dead still. Claudia's face drained of color. Her gavel slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow clatter. I looked straight at her. "We're done living under fear," I said. "You don't speak for us anymore. This community deserves better." The crowd erupted not in chaos but in unity. Neighbors who had once looked away were now shouting for her removal. "Resign," someone yelled. Then a dozen voices joined. "Resign, resign." Cameras flashed as Claudia stumbled back, eyes wild, surrounded by the very people she once ruled. The county inspectors took it from there. 2 days later at City Hall, they ruled the HOA's actions illegal. All violations void. All fines refunded. Claudia and her board under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Her name, once whispered in fear, now plastered across headlines as a cautionary tale. When I left that hearing, I didn't feel victory, just quiet. The kind that comes when the noise finally dies and the truth stands alone. The greenhouse still glowed behind our home, steady and untouched. It wasn't just glass and metal anymore. It was proof that fear only wins when good people stay silent. And if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's simple. Power built on lies always collapses once someone has the courage to call it what it is.